It's not exactly a secret the fashion industry as a whole has a long history of labor abuses and poor working conditions when it comes to garment workers. Though many may think the industry has generally put its sweatshop past behind it, or that it's only still happening in distant parts of the world, it hits closer to home than one would think. In the 5 years since a major transformation has been happening, a groundbreaking new law in California might be the major step needed to change the U.S. fashion industry for good. Understanding the major shift comes back to how the supply chain for fashion works in the first place.
Sweatshop workers are often paid extremely low wages, work an excessive amount of hours, and have few safety regulations in place. Workers are controlled and monitored by managers and are often fined if they are found to have left work without prior approval. Oftentimes, workers have to live and work in the same factory, as their wage barely lets them keep rent, and their wage mostly goes into food to feed their families. Sweatshops are often hidden in areas that are not checked by regulation sectors, letting them get away with the exploitation of their workers. Sometime around the late 18th century, sweatshops would often be in a person's own home that would then become a small factory. They signed a contract that would let them do a certain job for a certain price. However, this often led to the exploitation of workers, which oftentimes were women, children, undocumented workers, and recent immigrants. In doing so, the employment was quite tedious and would not often have a great end product.
Sweatshop laborers, predominantly comprising of women and children, endure harsh living conditions, coupled with extensive hours of work and small compensation that doesn't allow and doesn't cover basic necessities. In many industrialized nations like Bangladesh, China, and India, the current minimum wage barely adds up to half or even a fifth of what is required for a family's need. For instance, Bangladeshi workers receive a small hourly wage of approximately 33 cents, while their counterparts in India earn around 58 cents per hour. The constant demand for new clothing from consumers takes a toll on both people and the environment. This unsustainable business model, coupled with the intention of designing products to wear out quickly, leads to wasteful practices. It is estimated that the global production of new garments reaches between 80 and 100 billion annually, with a concerning rate of a truckload of used clothing being incinerated or dumped in landfills every second.
Sweatshop labor can perpetuate a cycle of poverty. Workers may earn wages that are not sufficient for a decent standard of living, leading to the reliance on cheap labor and perpetuating the cycle across generations. The tough conditions and low pay mean that they can't really access services like healthcare or education, which limits their chances of breaking free from the poverty cycle. Companies benefit from this cheap labor, which creates a demand that keeps sweatshops alive and makes escaping poverty even harder. So to break this cycle, we needed to tackle the root issues like improving labor conditions and ensuring fair wages. Well, what are ways we could end this ongoing situation? First, we can start by demanding sweatshop-free products. Take it to big action. You can do this by filling out a comment card and asking for the company to make sure that the workers are being paid and treated fairly. As well, you could also visit the company's website and send a message online. Asking questions is your biggest strength. Boycotting sweatshops is less efficient to work due to there being no alternative sources of income for the poor. Donate instead of throwing your clothes out. This allows you to shop locally, such as a second-hand, or donate to your friends. It's such an easy system.
Also, by shopping for second-hand clothes. For example, at thrift stores, swap meets, vintage shops, and online resale shops. Thrift stores can be just as less expensive than shopping on fast fashion websites, such as Shein and Zara. You can also shop at sustainable brands, but this doesn't mean that you have to stop shopping at your favorite stores. Stores like Levi's and Patagonia are very sustainable too. Levi's is a sweatshop-free brand that offers repairs and is willing to take back clothes to recycle them. Some big brands to avoid are H&M, Forever 21, TJ Maxx, Ross, Shein, Gap, Disney, and Adidas. When shopping, you can look at specific tags on the item of clothing. For example, a Unite label. This guarantees that it was made by members of the union, Unite Here. Unite Here guarantees that the members have negotiated a contract with the company that covers wages, benefits, job safety, and production standards. The last and final thing you can do is educate yourself and others around you. This can change the fashion industry more than anyone realizes.
We are constantly being reminded of the horrible things that are not only being done to the planet but to our community when wearing our everyday clothes. But when you shop sustainably and are aware of what you are spending your money on, you will see a difference.